Inside, the space was dimly lit with strands of buzzing fluorescent lights. Shadows draped the far corners. Rows of folding chairs formed a crooked arc around a platform scattered with clutter tools, furniture, crates, and forgotten things. The people were few, maybe a dozen, mostly older men, quiet, their coats dusty with time and their expressions unreadable. The kind of men who knew the weight of rusted metal and the price of old machines. I stayed near the back, close to the door. My daughter was still asleep, swaddled in the stroller, her little hand gripping the edge of the blanket, like she was holding on to a dream. The auctioneer's voice rang out like it had been doing this for decades, tired, but practiced. Next, up lot 42, box of assorted hand tools, starting bid, $5. The items rolled past like ghosts of usefulness, tarnished lamps, typewriters that hadn't felt a keystroke in years, a box of mismatched china, nothing anyone seemed eager to own. Still. The room stayed quiet, except for the low shuffle of boots on concrete, the occasional cough, and the echo of the gavel tapping wood. I wasn't there to buy. I wasn't there to participate. I just needed a roof and a moment to breathe. But then something caught my attention, not the item itself, but the silence that followed it. Lot 50, unmarked wooden crate, contents unknown. Starting bid, $1. A pause. The room didn't move. No shifting in chairs. No murmurs of interest, just stillness. I looked at the crate. It sat awkwardly on the edge of the platform, about the size of a microwave. Its surface was scratched and worn, the kind of thing that might have lived in a garage corner for decades. $1. The number repeated in my mind like a strange echo. $1 wouldn't fix anything. It wouldn't stretch the bills or change the storm or bring back the engine of a truck already gone cold. But it was something, and something, in that moment, felt like everything. I shifted my weight, uncertain. I wasn't here for this. I had no reason, no logic, and yet, the silence dared me. The crate waited, forgotten, unwanted. My fingers grazed the crumpled bills in my pocket, damp from the rain, soft at the edges. One of them could be enough, just one. That moment hung in the air like a held breath, in a place where no one bid. I raised my hand, and the room stayed silent. The crate sat alone now, on a splintered table pushed to the side as the auction moved on. It didn't belong to any era in particular, just old, heavy, made of thick weather-worn wood, darkened by time and stained by use. 2 iron hinges were bolted shut across the top, rusted and tight, as if whatever was inside hadn't seen daylight in decades. No one came forward. No one asked about it. No one even looked twice, except me. I could still feel the shift in the room when I raised my hand. It wasn't curiosity or approval. It was the kind of glance you give someone picking up a stray shoe on the side of the road, bemused, maybe even pitying. A few chuckles had followed, low and brief. You bought a mystery, for $1. Bold. I hadn't said a word in return. I just stepped forward, my boots scuffing against the slick concrete floor, and rested both hands on the edge of the crate. It was colder than I expected, rough to the touch, like bark that had never softened. When I tried to lift it, I nearly lost my balance. It was heavier than it looked, awkward in its shape and dead weight. My arms shook as I pulled it to my chest, not from awe or excitement, but from sheer weakness. My body, hollowed out by days of skipped meals, long walks, and restless nights. The ache in my shoulders was sharp. My fingers tingled beneath the pressure of its edges. Still, I held on. Outside, the rain still fell in endless curtain of grey. I carried the box beneath it, step by slow step, feeling the weight press not just on my arms, but in my chest. It wasn't just a box. Not anymore. It was a choice, a moment, a surrender to the unknown. The stroller's handle dug into my side as I walked, one hand pulling it forward while the other clutched the crate. My daughter stirred, eyelids fluttering open just enough to glimpse the shape in my arms before drifting off again. Her breath, soft and steady, was the only sound that mattered. I didn't know what was inside. I didn't even care. Not yet. It could have been nails, could have been bricks, could have been nothing, but it was mine, ours. The bus stop shelter down the block offered a moment of stillness. I set the crate down on the wet bench, just to breathe, just to feel the relief in my spine. The rain softened against the roof above. Distant car lights blurred through the mist. The night had a silence to it, one that pressed in gently, like a hand on your shoulder. I sat beside the crate, the stroller in front of me, the street behind. The wood was darker now, slick with water, but even in the dim light, I noticed something I hadn't before: faint engraving near the bottom corner, letters worn nearly smooth. I traced them with my finger. 3 initials, E.C.C. It meant nothing to me, but it was something, a thread, a whisper. Maybe it was foolish, maybe it was desperation clinging to meaning where there was none, but in a world that had taken so much, sometimes hope disguises itself in strange shapes. A rusted crate, a Wonderla bid, a baby's smile in the rain, and the quiet belief that maybe some mysteries are meant to be found by the ones who need them most. The apartment was silent when we returned, a silence not of peace, but of exhaustion. One room, peeling, wallpaper, a small electric heater rattling in the corner, the walls thin enough to hear neighbors coughing or pacing. But tonight, it was just stillness and the soft breath of my daughter sleeping beneath a worn patchwork blanket. The crate sat in the center of the floor, beads of rainwater still clinging to its corners, casting faint shadows across the linoleum. I watched it for a while, as if expecting it to move on its own. It didn't. It just waited, heavy and unreadable. I peeled off my damp coat, hung it near the heater, and moved slowly through the space. My stomach ached in hollow pulses. I hadn't eaten since morning, maybe the day before, but hunger didn't matter now. What mattered was that box, the weight it carried, the feeling it gave me. Not dread, not exactly hope either. Something in between. I crouched down and grabbed the old red toolbox from beneath the sink. The screwdriver inside was chipped and worn smooth from years of tightening loose hinges and fixing broken drawer pulls. It wasn't meant for this, but it would do. I knelt beside the crate, knees pressing into the cold floor, and slid the tip of the screwdriver beneath the first bolt. It groaned but gave way. Then another, then the third. Rust fell like dust from each turn, collecting in small orange piles on the floor. The final bolt creaked free, and for a moment I hesitated, my hand resting on the lid, palm flat against the wood. The room held its breath with me. Then slowly, I lifted the lid. A sharp, dry scent drifted up: old paper, machine oil, and something else I couldn't quite place. Inside, layered carefully like relics, were objects untouched by light for years. Blueprints, folded and yellowed, sat at the top. I unfolded one carefully, lines drawn by hand. Tiny numbers scrawled in the margins, angles and circuits I didn't understand. It looked like a machine, or part of one. I laid it beside me and reached for the next. Dusty tools, thin, precise, almost surgical. Small screwdrivers, coiled wires, metal rods of varying lengths, each wrapped in cloth, as if someone had meant to protect them. Then, a notebook, faded green cover, corners curled. A thick rubber band held it shut. I peeled it away and opened to the first page. The handwriting was slanted, patient. Sketches filled the margins, strange symbols, machines, something that resembled a circuit board fused with veins. Pages and pages of ideas, calculations, theories I couldn't grasp. And beneath it all, near the bottom of the crate, lay something wrapped in deep black velvet. I paused. Something about it felt deliberate. My hands moved slowly as I lifted it out. The weight was unexpected, dense, cool to the touch, balanced like a stone that wanted to stay in your palm. I unwrapped it carefully, layer by layer, the velvet folding away like night falling from the sky. Inside was a metallic object, roughly the size of a large apple, not quite round. Its surface was a weave of metal strands, like braided steel, frozen mid-motion. At the center, a glass-like orb shimmered faintly, like it held a light far, far away. And then, the softest sound, a hum, faint, so faint I thought it might be the heater clicking on again. But it wasn't. The object buzzed, not loudly, not aggressively, more like a murmur, like something recognizing it had been seen. I held it up to the light. No buttons, no seams, no wires, just a shape that seemed far too intentional to be forgotten. My chest tightened, not with fear, but a quiet awe, like standing in a cathedral built by hands long gone, or finding a message carved into a tree with your own name on it. It didn't feel modern, and yet it felt beyond anything I'd ever touched. I set it gently on the blanket beside the notebook, careful not to let it roll. The hum faded again, as if it were resting. I sat back against the wall. My daughter stirred in her sleep, letting out a small sound before settling again. Her breathing returned to that peaceful rhythm I'd memorized like a lullaby. Around us, the city carried on unseen. Cars in the distance, a siren echoing blocks away. But inside that small, forgotten room, something had shifted. I didn't know what this object was. I didn't know who had made it, or why it had been hidden in a crate no one wanted. But I knew this: whatever it was, it had waited, and now it was with us. Morning came slow and pale, filtering through the cracked blinds. Like water through gauze, the air was cold, still carrying the weight of the night before. My daughter slept quietly, her tiny fingers curled against the fabric of her blanket, unaware of the strange new presence that now shared our space. The metallic object rested on the table, unmoved, silent again, wrapped back in its velvet covering. It looked harmless, just another piece of forgotten machinery. But I knew better now. I had felt it, heard it, that quiet hum that seemed to recognize the world, if only. For a moment, I turned back to the notebook. It had dried overnight, its pages still yellowed but less fragile. The handwriting inside was neat, careful, as though every word mattered more than the last dot. The name at the front caught my eye. Elliot Kane. I said it out loud, though no one could hear me. The name felt unfamiliar, but somehow important. Beneath it, a date 30 years ago, maybe more. Time had faded the ink just slightly, but it was still legible. The first few pages were sketches, circuits, curved lines wrapped around boxes, arrows pointing toward what looked like signals. Every diagram had numbers, calculated, adjusted, crossed out, rewritten. I didn't understand the math, but I could see the obsession in the lines. The way each revision seemed more confident than the last dot. There were notes too, scribbled between margins, sometimes overlapping the drawings. Fragments of thoughts. Too much resistance in organic form. Needs to read environmental patterns, not override them. And then, later, begin shaping internal feedback. Build memory. It didn't read like a science manual. It read like a diary. A record of someone trying, again and again, to bring something alive. As I flipped through, each page pulled me deeper. Elliot Kane hadn't just been designing a machine. He was crafting something else, something that responded, adapted, remembered. A device that didn't simply function, but learned. Something with intention. A shape that mirrored not just logic, but feeling. I didn't know what it meant when he wrote, adaptive reactivity beyond hardware must emerge naturally. But the words stayed with me. They echoed with something deeper than science. Almost human. Toward the middle of the notebook, the entries shifted. The sketches became cleaner, less erratic. Pages filled with annotations like, form stabilized under low emotion stimuli, resonates with biological proximity, especially early stage cognition. And finally, prototype emits low-level response in presence of newborn, possibly linked to developmental field. Newborn. I froze. My eyes moved slowly to the bassinet, where my daughter lay, her breath soft and slow. A tiny crease sat between her brows, as if she were dreaming of something serious. Something real. I looked back at the book. Heart quiet but heavy. It had responded to her. That wasn't a coincidence. The last few pages of the notebook were different. There was no math, no diagrams, just writing. Lines that read like thoughts, whispered into the dark. I've gone as far as I can. I think it works, but I won't be the one to see what it becomes. If it finds someone with enough need, maybe it will choose. And then, the last sentence scrawled at the bottom of a nearly empty page. Prototype works. Needs a worthy reason to live. I read that line again and again. A reason to live. The words sat with me for a long time. I didn't know who Elliot Kane had been, not really. But in those pages, I could feel his loneliness, his obsession, his hope. He had poured everything into something no one else understood. Not to sell it, not for glory, but for purpose, for a reason. And now, somehow, it was here, in a forgotten crate, in a cracked one-room apartment, next to a baby with nothing but her father and the rain. I closed the notebook slowly, my hands trembling not from fear but from something I hadn't felt in a long time. A quiet, impossible beginning. Whatever this thing was, whoever had built it, hadn't been looking for profit. They had been waiting, and now, it had found us. Morning had shifted into a quiet grey afternoon. The kind where time feels suspended, neither rushing forward nor pulling back. The kind of stillness that feels like it's waiting for something to happen. The room was dim. Outside, The rain had faded into a steady mist that clung to the windows like breath on cold glass. I moved slowly through the silence, stepping round the small piles of papers, blueprints, and tools I had laid out the night before. On the table sat the device. The metallic surface, once cool and quiet, now shimmered faintly under the pale light leaking through the blinds. It didn't hum this time. It pulsed barely, but enough to make the air around it feel subtly alive, like it was aware of being watched. I hesitated. There was a line in the journal, scribbled next to one of the more frantic diagrams: responds to warmth, responds to intent, not power, not programming. Warmth, intent. I reached out. Slowly, my fingertips brushed the side of the object, and instantly, a soft glow bloomed across its surface. Not bright, just enough to trace the curves and braids in the metal, soft, shifting like light beneath water. The glow followed the shape of my hand, lingering a moment where my skin had touched, before fading back into stillness. It hadn't shocked me, hadn't resisted, it had responded. I took a slow breath and opened the journal again, flipping through the marked instructions. They weren't exactly clear. The entries had grown more erratic toward the endless diagrams, more desperate notes, as if Elliot Kane had been rushing against time. But one sketch stood out: a broken appliance, the device attached with copper wiring, an arrow pointing to the word integration. My eyes drifted toward the old toaster on the shelf, a thrift store find from 2 years ago. Burned out heating coil. One side never worked. I kept it only because I couldn't afford a new one. I pulled it down gently, setting it on the table beside the device. The plug had frayed at the base. Dust clung to its corners. A small dent in the metal gave it the look of something long past its usefulness. I followed the drawing, carefully cutting a small opening in the toaster's shell and using a bit of wiring from the crate to form a link. I attached the device using 2 of the slender tools I'd found, fitting the ends into grooves that seemed designed to connect. When it clicked into place, I paused and waited for a long moment. Nothing happened. Then, a faint vibration beneath the surface of the table. A low, barely there hum, like the slow start of an idea forming. The glow returned, this time brighter. The center orb inside the device pulsed in rhythm once, twice, and then faster, like a heartbeat syncing with something unseen. I stepped back, unsure what to expect. The toaster made a noise, a soft tick, then a quiet pop, as if it had just ejected something, but it was empty. Cautiously, I plugged it in. The wall socket sparked briefly, just a flicker, and then nothing. Silence again. I pressed the switch, and both sides glowed, warm, even. I slid in a slice of bread, not because I was hungry, but because I needed to know it wasn't a trick. Within seconds, the smell of toast filled the room, comforting and strange. I hadn't smelled that in months. I pulled the slice out, perfectly golden, no scorch, no cold patch. I stared at the toaster, then at the device, still glowing faintly, still quiet. I sat down slowly, the edge of the chair creaking beneath me. My eyes never left the table, and then the thought came, soft but sharp, whispered more than spoken. Did I fix it? Or did it fix itself? It was impossible, all of it, but it had happened. A toaster, reborn, by something that wasn't just a machine, by something that listened. The room was dim again, caught in that quiet space between night and morning. The air felt still, as if even the walls were waiting for something. Outside, the city slept beneath a blanket of grey clouds. The streetlights glowed faintly through the misted window panes, casting slow-moving shadows across the floor. Inside, the only sound was the gentle rhythm of my daughter's breathing. She was curled on her side in the bassinet trapped in her blanket, thumb resting loosely near her chin. Peaceful, small, so small. I sat nearby, barely awake, watching her sleep. Lately, I'd been thinking more about the way the doctors had spoken, kind, careful words meant to soften quiet fears. She's just a little behind, they said. Some babies take longer. Every child moves at their own pace, and yet, the waiting had its own weight. She hadn't crawled, not really, just rolled and reached and struggled with effort that seemed too big for her tiny frame. The sounds she made were sweet but simple coos and sighs. No patterns, no mimicry. Sometimes she'd smile for no reason, and I'd tell myself that was enough. But I'd seen other babies her age, how they moved, how they responded, how their eyes followed voices with a kind of alertness. Still, I never let the worry show. Not to her. Never to her. That night, the object sat where I'd left it beside the toaster, wrapped again in velvet, but still pulsing faintly beneath the cloth. I was washing dishes in the small sink, the tap dripping rhythmically, when I heard a soft rustle behind me. She had stirred. I turned around. She was sitting up, barely. Her blanket had twisted around her legs, and her hands had reached over the edge of the bassinet, touching, grasping, and then her fingers brushed the device. Just the edge, just a graze, but in that instant, the pulse quickened. A light glowed beneath the velvet, slow and warm, not like electricity, but like a response, like breath. I stepped toward her, gently moving her hand away and tucking the velvet back over the object. She blinked up at me, eyes wide and curious, then slowly settled again. I didn't think much of it. Maybe a moment of coincidence, maybe nothing at all. But the next morning I woke to silence, not crying, not babbling, just movement. She was standing, wobbly, hands on the wall to keep balance, but standing. Her head just barely reached the windowsill, her legs shaking with the effort. She turned toward me when I called her name, and in her eyes something new, awareness, strength. My heart caught in my chest, unsure what I was seeing. She giggled, then louder than she ever had before, and took one small step toward me. Then, another. She fell forward, right into my arms. And in that quiet moment, all the waiting, all the quiet doubts, all the unanswered questions, they cracked open. I didn't understand how. I didn't try to, but something had changed. Later that day, she sat on the floor near the object. It was still wrapped, still silent, but she looked at it as if it were familiar, as if she remembered it. She tapped her fingers against the wood of the crate where it had once been stored, and for the first time, she made a sound I'd never heard from her, a pattern, a shape. It wasn't quite a word, but it was close. I listened with tears welling up, not because I understood it, but because I felt it. Something was opening inside her, some door I didn't know existed, and all I could think was, maybe this is what Elliot Kane meant. Maybe it wasn't about power or invention or mechanics. Maybe it was about connection, response. A bridge between what is and what could be. That night, I sat with her by the window. She leaned against my chest, her breath soft, her body warm. Outside, the world remained the same, buildings worn by time, streets faded by rain. But inside, in this small room that held almost nothing, something extraordinary had begun. Something I couldn't explain, and maybe wasn't meant to. Some things don't change all at once. They arrive slowly, like fog rolling in across a field, soft, silent, barely noticeable until it's all around you. That's how it happened with the device. That's how the miracles began. It started small, a lamp, the kind with a fraying cord and a cracked shade. I'd found it in the alley behind our building, set beside a pile of junk left out for collection. The base was dented. The switch didn't click, the kind of thing that had already lived its life. I brought it inside and opened it up, dust floating from the metal like a sigh. The journal's instructions were sketchy at best, but I trusted the process. I'd learned that the device didn't need precision. It responded to intention, to effort. I connected the wires, wrapped the velvet back carefully around the object, and waited. The soft hum returned, that familiar glow from within, and then light, warm, steady, not harsh like before, but softer, brighter. The bulb inside wasn't just working, it was different, cleaner, clearer, clearer. The second was a fan, then a blender, then a space heater that hadn't worked in over a decade. Each time the object responded, and each time the thing it touched didn't just return to life, it improved. They worked quieter, smoother, as if something had healed, not just been fixed. I kept it quiet at first. I didn't know how to explain it. Who could I tell? Who would believe me? But word travels, even through cracked walls and paper-thin floors. One morning, my downstairs neighbor knocked a soft, uncertain knock, the kind that asks for more than just help. He stood with a radio in his hands, an old wooden model with dials worn smooth. "It hasn't played music since '96, he said, eyes low. I didn't promise anything. I didn't even speak. I just brought it inside, placed it gently on the table, and did what I'd learned to do. The hum came, stronger than before. The moment the device connected, a burst of static filled the room, and then music, soft jazz, drifting from the speaker like it had never stopped playing. The sound was fuller, warmer, like it had remembered its purpose. The man stood in silence, eyes shining, his hand pressed against the wood, like he could feel the music through it. He didn't ask how, he just nodded, then left quietly. After that, others came. A woman with a sewing machine that skipped stitches, a boy holding a toy train that hadn't moved in years, a teenager with a cracked digital camera passed down from his sister. Each one came in broken, each one left whole. I kept no sign outside, no phone number, but still, they found me. They didn't bring money. They brought stories, and somehow, the device listened. One day, an older man wheeled in slowly, the rubber on one of his wheelchair wheels completely worn down. The motor barely worked. He looked tired but hopeful. I worked all afternoon, careful, quiet, letting the hum guide me. When it was done, the chair moved smoother than it ever had. He rolled in slow circles across the floor, then looked at me and said, "You ever think, this thing ain't from here?" I didn't answer, because I had thought about it. The journal never said where it came from, only why it was made. To adapt, to respond, to choose. It didn't feel like science. It felt like something older, something deeper. That night, after everyone had gone, I sat in the quiet, my daughter curled in my lap, drifting to sleep. The object sat on the windowsill, wrapped once again, glowing faintly beneath the cloth. The room felt different now, not full, not rich, but alive. People still whispered about this strange man fixing things upstairs. I heard the rumors, miracle worker, madman, but I knew the truth. I wasn't fixing anything, it was, and all I had done was give it a reason. The rain had returned, heavy and unbroken. It drummed against the windows like the slow tapping of time itself, an endless rhythm that filled every silence. The room was darker than usual, even in midday, with the kind of gray that turns hours into something shapeless. I remember the knock, 3 soft raps on the door, measured, exact. Not the hesitant tap of a neighbor, not the hurried pound of someone desperate, something in between. I opened it slowly. He stood there, tall, dry, despite the storm, the shoulders of his gray suit spotless, his black umbrella still closed in one gloved hand. His face was unreadable, not unfriendly, but void of the usual things, curiosity, hesitation, even judgment. His eyes moved quickly, scanning the room in seconds, not to admire, to assess. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. I should have stopped him, but something about him. He didn't move like a stranger. "I'm from an advanced tech acquisition firm," he said, voice low but firm, like a statement. "That didn't require your understanding. We're tracking an object, a specific object, and I believe it's here." He glanced toward the table, toward the velvet cloth I'd grown so used to seeing that I hardly noticed it anymore. He didn't point, he didn't reach. He just knew. I stayed quiet. He walked to it with slow steps and stopped inches away. He didn't touch it. He just stared, as if he confirmed something long suspected. Then, almost gently, he said, "That item isn't yours. It was never supposed to be found." The words hung in the air, heavier than the rain. I asked him how he knew about it, how he knew Elliot Kane. He didn't answer right away. He walked the edges of the room instead, eyes scanning the walls, the broken heater, the repaired toaster, the crate still resting in the corner. He moved like someone tracing history, reading the aftermath of something sacred. Then he said it. Plainly, Kane worked with us, years ago, brilliant, reckless. He believed in things that didn't belong in this world. He turned toward me. There was an explosion. Kane died. His notes vanished. We assumed the prototype was destroyed. He said the word like it was. Dangerous prototype. Not miracle. Not gift. Just property. I asked him what it really was. He didn't explain. He didn't need to. His silence was answer enough. To him, it was a threat. Not because it harmed, but because it changed. And because it didn't belong to those who needed it most. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, metal case-leak, black, cold in his palm. "We can take it now. No harm done." But there would have been harm. Because in his voice, I heard the end of what had just begun. The boy's toy train, the neighbor's wheelchair, my daughter's first steps. The quiet miracles weren't just repairs. They were moments of hope reborn in broken places. I stood between him and the object. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He simply said, "You don't know what it's capable of." And he was right. I didn't. Not fully, but I knew what it wasn't. It wasn't theirs. Not anymore. I told him so. Not loudly. Just enough. He watched me for a long time. Then he closed the case, tucked it back into his coat, and walked slowly to the door. As he opened it, rain swept in behind him, cool and sharp like a warning. He paused once, looking over his shoulder. "This doesn't end here," he said. Then he was gone, vanished into the storm, as if he'd never come. I stood there for a long time, the sound of the rain soaking into the walls. The object pulsed faintly from the table, wrapped in velvet, unmoved, unbothered. But I felt it. Something had shifted. Someone new, and whatever piece we had left was borrowed. The rain never really stopped. It just changed from heavy downpour to mist to a cold, silent drizzle that soaked through your clothes. Before you realized it, it was still falling when I made the decision. I'd barely slept since the man in the grey suit came. His voice had echoed through my thoughts every night. Quiet and clinical. "That item isn't yours. It was never supposed to be found." But it had been found. And not by accident. They were watching now. I saw them. First it was just a parked car across the street. A black SUV, engine low and quiet. Then it came back again the next night. Same spot, same time. No headlights, no movement. But I knew. I could feel it. Like a pressure in the air that never lifted. And then the silhouette. The man from before. Leaning against the hood, waiting. He didn't come back to the door. Not this time. Now, he was patient. He didn't need to force anything. He knew fear would do the work for him. That night, I packed what I could. Not much. A bag with 2 shirts, some cash, diapers, a cracked photo of her mother, and the device, wrapped now not in velvet, but inside a clean diaper. Then hidden deep in the belly of a plastic toy horse, the kind you squeeze to hear it sing. Only this one no longer sang. It hummed. I strapped my daughter to my chest, her tiny body pressed close. She didn't cry. She never cried much. She seemed to sense things. Always had. The hallway outside our apartment echoed with the same tired creaks. I moved slowly, carefully, stepping over that spot that always whined beneath the rug. At the stairwell window, I paused. The SUV was still there. Lights off. 2 figures inside, still watching. I turned away and moved fast. Down the stairs, past the peeling paint, through the rear exit that opened into the alley. The cold hit like a breath held too long. I pulled my coat tighter around her. We ran. Not far at first, just to the corner, then to the bus station on 5th, the one no one used anymore. I bought a ticket with the last of the bills in my coat. Destination didn't matter. Distance did. I chose a town I'd never heard of, middle of nowhere. 1 road in, 1 road out. The bus was almost empty. A man asleep in the back, a woman knitting 2 rows ahead. I sat by the window and held her close. She slept against me, heartbeat slow and steady. The toy with the hidden core nestled in her blanket. Out the window, the city slid away, its lights dull and blurred by the rain, its secrets shrinking behind us, and for a brief moment, I felt something I hadn't in days. Breath, but it wasn't peace. Not really, because running isn't peace. It's survival dressed in motion. I didn't know where we were going. I didn't know who would be there when we arrived. But I knew we couldn't stay. Not when they wanted to take what had already chosen us. Not when I'd seen what it could do. Not when I'd seen what she could do. Outside, the road wound through fields and silence. Inside, she stirred, tiny fingers gripping the edge of my jacket, and somewhere beneath layers of cloth and plastic and cotton, the object hummed. Low, steady, almost like it was breathing, almost like it understood. I closed my eyes and leaned back, the seat shuddering beneath me as the bus pulled farther from everything we knew. We were alone, but we were not empty. We had something now, something powerful, something dangerous, something alive, and we were running toward something unknown, but maybe, finally, something that felt like a beginning. The mountains met us like old memories, familiar, distant, softened by time. The road was narrow, winding higher with every mile, until the cell towers disappeared behind thick pine and fog. We kept driving, past weathered signs and forgotten gas stations, into the hush of elevation. At the end of a broken gravel path, framed by trees bent with age and wind, we found it. The cabin. It hadn't been touched in years, maybe decades. My grandfather's name was still faintly etched into the mailboxy, our Langley letters worn pale by rain and frost. I remembered visiting once as a child, but that version of the place was gone. What remained was grey and slanted, its roof bowed like tired shoulders, windows rimmed in cobwebs, but it stood, and for now, that was enough. That inside, the air smelled of old wood, rusted hinges, and dust too fine to sweep. A single room stretched beneath the sagging beam's fireplace, a broken desk in the corner. Mice had chewed through the fabric of the curtains, leaves rustled along the baseboards, but the silence was different here, not threatening, just waiting. I laid my daughter on a pile of folded blankets near the hearth. She cooed softly, her fingers wrapped around the leg of a faded stuffed animal we'd carried from the city. The toy still held the hidden object, the device that hummed faintly beneath all the cotton and plastic. I sat by the window and opened the notebook. It had dried further in the mountain air, its pages curling at the edges but still intact. The ink had faded in some places, but the meaning was still there, traced in diagrams, equations, scribbled thoughts. And slowly, the truth began to form. The device wasn't just meant to repair, it wasn't even just meant to improve, it was meant to interact deeply, biologically. It wasn't designed to fix things, it was designed to choose, to bond, to evolve. There were entries I hadn't fully read before, pages I'd skipped in the rush of survival. Now, I read them slowly, carefully, line by line. Biological integration, viable. Neuronal response, strongest. In early stage cognitive development, device selects based on proximity and emotional resonance. She smiled at it today. It pulsed back. A note underlined, twice read. This is not a machine, it's a mirror. It becomes what it's near. I stopped reading. Outside, snow began to fall in light flurries, dancing between the pine trees. The light inside dimmed to a pale blue as clouds blanketed the peaks. I turned to her, my daughter. She was awake, staring at the toy in her lap, her hands slowly tracing its curves through the fabric. She looked sharper, more present. Her eyes moved with quiet focus, her expression no longer loose and dreamy, but deliberate. She was changing, not just growing, changing. There was one page, near the very end of the journal, that chilled me. The prototype seeks purpose. Once bonded, it begins to reshape cognition around pattern recognition, sensory refinement, adaptive feedback loops. In short, it accelerates learning, dramatically. And beneath that, scribbled in almost panicked handwriting, your baby's neurons are adapting faster. It's choosing her. I sat in silence for a long time. I could hear her giggle, then grunted. Curison saw her crawling to the edge of the blanket pile, reaching toward the table leg, standing with better balance than I'd seen just days ago. She wasn't just improving, she was advancing. It wasn't magic, it wasn't science fiction, it was a design, a bond, a relationship. She wasn't using the device, it was becoming part of her. The snow thickened, the trees swayed, the cabin creaked under the shifting wind, and I realized this place, this old forgotten shelter, was the perfect cocoon. No eyes, no noise, no black SUVs, just time. Time for me to understand. Time for her to grow. Time for us to become whatever we were now becoming together. The fire crackled behind me. Her tiny hands tapped rhythmically against the wooden floor, and the device, still buried in toy stuffing and cloth, pulsed gently, not brighter, not louder, just deeper, as if it knew something I didn't, as if it had already seen the future we hadn't yet imagined. The wind outside the cabin softened in the days that followed. Snow blanketed the forest in a thick hush, like the world had been muffled, on purpose muted, just enough for something delicate to emerge. It was the kind of quiet where time feels like it stretches, expands, and folds back in on itself. And in that space, she changed, not abruptly, not like a flicked switch, but slowly, layer by layer, like dawn. It began with a word, not a sound, not a babble or mimicry, a word, clear, gentle, light. She pointed at the window as she said it. The sky had broken open for the first time in days, and golden light spilled across the wooden floor in long, soft lines. Her voice had no trace of surprise, no struggle. She said it like she'd always known what it meant. I sat still. My hands trembled against the worn fabric of my jeans. The next day, it was a full sentence. I want the blue cup. Not perfect, but fluent, complete in thought and rhythm. Her eyes met mine with certainty, not questioning, just declaring. Something small but impossible to ignore. It wasn't just her words. Her movements grew precise, graceful, like her body was catching up to a new tempo only she could hear. She began stacking things, organizing them by shape and then by color. Pine cones from outside, stones from the hearth, silverware, even when I wasn't watching. She solved the puzzle my grandfather had kept on the bookshelf, hand-carved wooden cube, meant to be twisted and shaped into a star. I'd never solved it. She did, in silence, then set it down with a kind of soft pride. It wasn't just brilliance, it was harmony. Nothing in her felt strange or robotic, nothing cold. She laughed, she played. She still reached for my hand when she stumbled, but behind her eyes something was alive, something bright, something building. I kept the journal beside me now, flipping pages every night after she slept. I began to see the entries not as notes from a scientist, but confessions from someone who had crossed a threshold too large to understand. The device does not add knowledge, it removes friction. It allows the mind to meet itself, fully. No delay between desire and possibility. I read those lines over and over. They echoed in me like scripture. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, my daughter was blooming. I caught myself watching her sometimes, afraid to interrupt her silence, afraid that if I spoke, she'd stop floating so high. But she never did. She just kept moving, learning, asking. Her questions were curious, not mechanical. What makes the moon stay up? Why does water dance when it's hot? Do the trees remember me when I leave? I never had all the answers, but maybe that didn't matter, because she wasn't looking for facts. She was mapping the world, not just with her mind, but with her soul. And yet, amid the wonder, there was still the weight, because I knew what the man in the grey suit had meant. This wasn't random, this wasn't meant to be found, and it certainly wasn't meant to stay hidden. But how could I turn away from it now? How could I separate her from what had given her this light? I didn't know what was coming. I didn't know how much time we had. But in those quiet days, time felt like a gift. We filled it with warmth, fires crackling low, the smell of snow-dampened pine, bowls of soup cooling in our hands. I told her stories before bed, ones my grandfather had told me, and though she already knew how they ended, she listened anyway, her head resting on my chest. She was still her, just more. Not a different child, not a different soul, just more open, more awake, and maybe that's what scared them. Not what the device did, but what it revealed, that there was more in us than we're told to believe, that somewhere beneath the noise and routine and fear we are capable of seeing the world differently, of understanding it in ways we've forgotten. That night, as she drifted to sleep beside the fire, I sat by the window and looked out across the white blanketed woods. The stars pulsed behind passing clouds, and somewhere, far away, I knew they hadn't stopped searching. But for now, we were still, and in the hush of those frozen nights, something divine was unfolding, quietly, deliberately, at the speed of light. The snow had started to melt. Little streams of water curled down the edges of the cabin's roof, dripping in slow, uneven rhythms that echoed through the silence. The forest, once muffled in white, now whispered again, branches creaking, birds returning, the earth softening beneath. Months of frost. Spring was coming, and with it, so did they. I saw the first sign in the distance. Tracks, not animal to clean, too linear, tire marks, pressed deep into the wet dirt at the base of the hill, just beyond the pines. They hadn't driven all the way up. They were cautious now, watching. Then, that evening, just as the sky turned lavender and gold, a figure appeared near the clearing. Not in a suit this time. A coat, casual, too casual. But the posture gave it away, the same stillness, the same eyes that never really looked at anything except what they wanted. He stepped into the clearing like it was a routine stop. No rush, no fear, just quiet control. I didn't open the door. Didn't need to. He spoke loud enough to carry through the wood and glass. They weren't here to threaten, he said. They were here to help. They offered safety, protection, money, even a new name, a new home. They'd take care of everything. He said it like a gift, like a favor, like I should be grateful. But I stood there, holding my daughter in my arms, feeling the steady pulse of her breath against my chest, and I knew they didn't understand. They still didn't understand. This wasn't about an object anymore. It wasn't about technology or stolen property or prototypes. It wasn't a device. Not now, not to her, not to me. It had changed, bonded. Whatever it had once been, it had become something else, something alive, and the longer it stayed close to her, the more they resonated with each other, not like owner and tool, but like two instruments tuned to the same key. She felt it when it pulsed. It brightened when she smiled. It dimmed when she cried. They were linked in a way science couldn't chart, in a way systems couldn't replicate. I stayed behind the glass. He left eventually, fading back into the trees. But I knew this wasn't the end. That night, I barely slept. I watched the edge of the woods for movement, heart thudding beneath every crack of branch or gust of wind. The stars above blinked cold and distant, too far to hear the questions building inside me. Were we really safe, or just forgotten? For, now, my daughter stirred in her sleep, small fingers curled around the toy horse she still carried everywhere. Inside, the object remained silent, warm, present, not glowing, not humming, just there, and yet, somehow, more powerful than ever, had chosen her, and I had chosen to protect that bond, no matter the cost. They wanted her back in the world they understood, where everything could be explained, filed, owned, but she didn't belong to them. She belonged to wonder, to something far older than language, to a future they weren't ready to imagine. And maybe I wasn't either, but I knew this: we couldn't go back. Not now. They'd return soon, and with fewer smiles. But I wasn't afraid anymore, because somewhere deep in the pages of that old notebook, I had read a line I hadn't fully understood until now. The device doesn't follow instruction, it follows belief, and belief is something they can't track, can't buy, can't bury. We still had the mountains, we still had time, and more than anything, we still had each other. The forest was quieter than usual that morning, no birdsong, no wind, just the faint creaking of thawing branches and the soft hush of the river below. The world held its breath, and so did I. I sat by the old desk inside the cabin, the journal open in front of Mitt's pages worn thin from days of study, from nights of restless wonder. The diagrams looked different now, not mysterious, not magical, just deliberate, human. Elliot Kane had drawn them by hand, sketched with trembling precision. Every circuit, every channel, every note was part of a story he'd never lived to finish. But I had, and I was about to end it. I lit the match slowly, held it above the yellowed paper, letting the flame catch the corner first. The fire spread with a soft whisper page by page, memory by memory, until the notebook curled into itself, blackened and done. The last traces of his genius, his warnings, his legacy, gone, at least. That's what they needed to believe. They came back again that afternoon, 3 of them. This time, no suits, no promises, just sharp eyes and rehearsed lines. They said they wanted proof the object had been destroyed, said it was for everyone's safety. I nodded, silent, calm, then walked with them to the river's edge. The water had thawed just enough to move slow and glassy, like something dreaming beneath the surface. I held out the object, wrapped in the same velvet, sealed in a case I'd made to match the original in weight and shape. Their eyes never left it. I told them what they wanted to hear, that I understood now, that it was too dangerous, that it didn't belong to any of us then. I tossed it. The splash was soft, almost muted. The current accepted it without a fight. They watched it disappear, satisfied. One of them nodded. Another whispered something into a small earpiece. Then they left, without looking back, convinced the story was over. But they never asked the right questions. They didn't ask why the cabin's lights still worked, even with no power. Why my daughter could now read signs on the trees we'd never taught her to name. Why her laughter sometimes echoed a second longer than sound should linger. They never asked what I'd been building. The truth was, I had followed Kane's instructions, every diagram, every scribble, and from that, I'd made a replica, not a working one, just a shell, a convincing lie. The real device had never left the cabin. It was hidden now, deeper than ever, not beneath the floorboards, not buried in the woods, but bonded with her. I don't mean physically. There were no wires, no surgeries, no nonsense. It had chosen her, and in the quiet hours between sunrise and sleep, it continued to grow with her, like a second pulse just beneath her skin. I could see it in the way she moved, in the way she listened to the wind, in how she understood the rhythm of things most people never noticed. She was still a child, still mine, still filled with innocence and wonder, but within her now lived something ancient, something vast, beyond repair or replication. It wasn't power in the traditional sense. It was alignment, clarity, a different kind of intelligence, and no matter how many rivers they searched, or journals they burned, they'd never find it again, because it no longer existed. It had become. I remember sitting by the fireplace that night, watching her trace patterns into the soot with her finger, humming a song I didn't know but felt familiar. The firelight danced across her face, and for a moment, I saw not a toddler but something ... timeless ... not eerie, not unnatural ... just awakened ... and I realized that was the final choice, not destroying the journal, not tricking the men in black coats, but choosing belief, choosing her, choosing to trust what was unfolding, even if I didn't fully understand it, because some things aren't meant to be controlled. Some things are meant to guide us gently, quietly into the future we can't yet name. I stood, kissed the top of her head, and whispered a thank you. I wasn't sure who it was for, maybe Cain, maybe the stars, maybe the device itself, and as the fire dimmed and the trees returned to sleep, I knew this story wasn't ending, it was only hiding, until the world was ready. That morning came wrapped in soft light. Early autumn sunlight filtered through mist, rising off the hills. It painted the trees in pale gold, swaying gently as if they, too, were holding their breath. A quiet kind of magic lingered in the air, the kind you can only feel when something is beginning. I watched her from across the kitchen as she tied her own shoes. Her small hands moved with certainty, not rushed, not clumsy, just calm and precise. She wore a sky blue jacket with little stars along the cuffs. Her backpack was almost too big for her, but she didn't seem to notice. Inside it were crayons, a snack, a folded paper heart with my name on it, and something more. Not a thing, not a device, but something within. She turned to me then, her eyes catching the light, in that way they sometimes did, like she was seeing not just me, but everything behind me. The sky, the wind, the weight I tried so hard to carry quietly. Be good, Daddy. Her voice was soft, but it cut through me like music, like a song that had always been playing in the background. And only now I realized I'd been humming all along. I walked her to the car. The drive to the school was short winding roads, wrapped in amber leaves and sleepy homes. Children with backpacks bigger than their bodies waited at the corners. Some waved, some didn't, but she noticed all of them. She always noticed everything when we pulled up to the school gates. She didn't hesitate, not even for a second. She climbed out with quiet excitement, like she already knew what came next. Like she had already walked these halls in her dreams. She turned to me one last time and smiled, not to seek comfort, but to give it. I knelt down and hugged her tight, tighter than I probably should have. Her little arm squeezed back, and for a second, the world blurred. Not from fear, not from sadness, just the weight of loving something so much that you forget how to let it go, even just for a few hours. She stepped through the gates. The other kids didn't look at her differently. They couldn't have known, couldn't have seen what she carried. But I knew, because she wasn't just walking into a building filled with lessons and laughter. She was walking into the world, bringing with her a light no one could put out. And not because of what had happened, not because of the device, or the journal, or the months we spent in hiding, but because of who she had always been, because she had chosen joy, because she had chosen wonder, even when the world didn't make sense. And somewhere deep inside her, that ancient, humming wisdom had made its home. To overpower, not to control, but to grow alongside her, to listen, to guide. I stood there for a long time after she disappeared inside, watching the door, the windows, the wind fluttering the flag beside the school sign. Other parents left. The parking lot emptied. Still I stood, holding space for the moment. It was quiet again, but not empty, because in that silence, something gentle was blooming. She was out there now, among the others, learning their rhythms, teaching them hers, and maybe they wouldn't see it right away. Maybe they never would, but she would leave traces. Kindness in her footsteps, curiosity in her laughter, stillness in the way she listened, and wherever she went, something would change, something small, something slow, something true. There's a drawer in the corner of the cabin, wooden, old, and slightly uneven, the kind that sticks when you pull too fast. At the bottom of that drawer, under a folded flannel and a broken compass, sits a single slip of paper, faded now, its edges curled, ink smudged by time. A receipt from a warehouse auction, One item, $1. I still remember the sound of that bid echoing off metal rafters. The rain outside, the smell of rust and oil in the air. I hadn't gone there for answers, just shelter. I didn't walk in expecting salvation. I didn't expect anything, really, because when you've lost so much, hope becomes something too expensive to afford. But that day, for a single dollar, something began. Something I couldn't name. Something bigger than understanding. The time, it just looked like junk. A crate, bolted shut. Heavy people had laughed when I raised my hand. $1, a joke to them, a risk to me. But now it feels like the turning point in a life I never imagined I'd live. Because that one act, that tiny decision made with empty pockets and a full heart, didn't just bring a strange object into my home. It brought light, and fear, and wonder, and choice. It brought a future that wasn't waiting to be found, but one that had to be made. I think about that sometimes when I watch her sleep. Her hair scattered across the pillow, her breath even and soft. No glow now, no signs of the impossible. Just a little girl, dreaming, and yet, within her, something extraordinary hums, quietly, not loud, not proud, just present. Just hasn't even know the full story yet. I haven't told her. Not everything. About the men in grey. Not about the nights I stayed up, watching headlights crawl past the tree line. Not about the fire, or the decoy, or the pages I memorized before burning. One day, I will. One day, she need to know. But not yet. Right now, she deserves to be a child. To chase birds across fields. To build castles from leaves and twigs. To giggle when the wind lifts her hair. Because childhood, too, is a kind of miracle. And maybe that's what the device understood, what Cain wrote between the lines. That the gift wasn't just in the fixing. It was in the becoming. That in giving someone the chance to grow into what they already carried inside them. Some people say miracles don't come cheap. That they require sacrifice, blood, loss, a price. But I don't believe that anymore. Because I paid $1, and what I got wasn't just a machine. Wasn't even just healing. It was a second chance. A reason to stay. A path I couldn't have drawn on my own. It was her, becoming her, and maybe, in some quiet way it was me, too, becoming a father again. Learning how to protect without controlling. How to believe without proof. The receipt crinkles when I hold it. The ink is almost gone, but it's still there. Still real. Proof of a moment no one else saw as holy. Proof that sometimes the smallest decisions ripple loudest. And if I could go back, stand again in that warehouse, pockets nearly empty, heart bruised and tired, I'd still raise my hand, still buy the box no one wanted, still say yes to the unknown, because that dollar didn't buy an object, it bought a doorway, and through it we found our future.